Welcome to The Deep End by OnDeck, a podcast where visionary builders, creators, and thinkers discuss world-changing stories and ideas. I'm your host, Marshall Kozlov.
And I think that's why it's so important for social tokens to exist, and why I believe that it's the first real manifestation of this 100 true fans theory, wherein it can actually be the case that someone buys your token and then a year in, you've been able to sustainably sort of like with a 100-member DAO, a 100-member creator DAO, kind of sustain yourself for an entire year and even beyond that, because, you know, your token has done like phenomenally well. And like, not only that, your content has been distributed far more than it could have ever been before.
OnDeck is where ambitious people worldwide go to start companies, find their next roles, and invest in their careers. The Deep End invites the founders, operators, and investors from the OnDeck community and beyond to turn their experiences into the ideas others need to start their own odysseys. Joining me in the Deep End today is Joel Alexander, the founder and CEO of Crowdpad, a tokenized community building platform for creators whose goal it is to help creators monetize on day one. Our conversation today centers around Web3 and the future of the creator economy. We discuss how the path to monetization on traditional creator economy platforms like YouTube is so long and onerous that most people just give up, and how allowing creators to launch their own token to distribute out to their fans and building token-gated communities might help resolve this. We also discuss the disparity of earnings between the average Web3 creator and the average creator on a platform like Meta, the best way of empowering independent artists with recognition and remuneration, how funding creators via social tokens versus cash donations aligns incentives and makes the 100 true fans thesis viable, and how TikTok is one of the most discovery-friendly mechanisms in the world right now for all kinds of creators. Whether you're a founder or investor interested in the next iteration of the creator economy, or you're just an aspiring individual creator looking to understand the landscape and the best tools available to reach and monetize an audience in 2022, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Joel Alexander, welcome to the Deep End.
Thank you so much, Marshall. It's nice to catch up again.
Yeah, it's great to catch up again with you too. Let's just start off by defining things. What is Crowdpad?
Yeah, so Crowdpad is building the operating system for creator DAOs. Fundamentally, the goal is to kind of give everyday creators access to a global capital community network. The core problem I would say that we're solving here is the fact that, like, you know, today on YouTube and sort of other sort of Web2 creator economy platforms, you need roughly like 4,000 watch hours plus 1,000 subscribers roughly to even make $0.01. And that journey typically takes about 1.5 to 2 years roughly. And by then you've kind of gone between this debate of like the things that you're passionate about and the things that pay your bills. It's just not like weighing up equally. And then you're just like, I might as well give up. So what we're trying to do is like on day one, help creators kind of monetize, because we believe that every person has at least one person that believes in them. And as a result, on day one, ideally you would have that $0.01. And that's kind of like the acceleration of that process of your path to monetization as a creator that Crowdpad facilitates.
And describe the monetization process that you're actually doing then.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically it's like, when a creator launches their own token, there's a 21 million token kind of supply that's minted on their behalf. And that kind of helps them to distribute like those particular tokens out to their fans or to, you know, members who they want to be sort of like a part of their community. And then after that, that kind of like, it's basically a process of like buying on one side and you receiving the funds on the other side, or that particular amount being locked in the treasury of the community kind of a thing. So for example, if you had a Joel coin, I launched a Joel coin, I send a link to you, Marshall, you would basically sort of create your non-custodial wallet through Crowdpad. And like if you don't have any crypto pre-existing, you'd get a fiat on-ramp that helps you go from credit card to crypto. And then you could basically simply purchase Joel coin in a, one or two step kind of process. And yeah, that's kind of like how you would purchase access to this token gated community. And yeah, we just go from there.
So I want to start really high level, and then we'll get into the very specifics here, because y'all have done a lot of great blogging on your site about the ideas here. Another quick compliment, because I actually suggest people go check it out, is you all did a great job of keeping things not too long, very direct, very, very straightforward, read through everything in 30 minutes. So that was huge. But let's just start about what excites you about crypto and the creator economy, because you're in an interesting space where you're focused on these two very hype fueled categories in the ecosystem we're talking about.
Yeah, it's possibly like two of the highest velocity categories of 2022 and 2020, late 2021 as well, I would say. Ever since the whole NFT summer piece, like it's just been on a different train altogether. I'm sure you saw the A16Z State of Crypto report as well, which kind of went like, the average Web3 creator makes something in the ballpark of 120K plus, whereas the average meta creator makes something like $0.1. So, obviously like early days for Web3 and like, fewer users and like, you can do the math that might make it seem, when you sort of like adjust those numbers, it might seem a little bit different. But like, I guess the part about crypto exciting me would be just this piece on the fact that like I was sort of making YouTube videos and like working for a creator economy startup when this whole thing like really came into fruition, right? So it wasn't so much I want to do something with crypto and it happened to be the creator economy. It was more so I want to do something with the creator economy and it happened to be crypto. And like that's kind of like what really fueled, like in my opinion, enables a global community to kind of access this kind of pool of capital and community, right? Crypto was the one tool that sort of allowed for that to happen. My passion is for creators. My passion is for those independent artists that basically have struggled for years on end to get any recognition, to get any remuneration, and like really put them first. And that you'll probably see that like on our platform as well as in when we move to the mainnet piece in the next couple of weeks, wherein you'd mostly see very user-friendly experiences happen as opposed to developer-native like crypto experiences. So that's kind of like what we're trying to prioritize. It's just got to be simple for normal people to kind of come on and use. And crypto happens to be the key enabler there. And that's why we're really like excited about it.
And something I want to get into for a second, because I want to focus on these two spaces specifically, and then we'll talk about how Crowdpad is implementing them. Just explain the basic creator economy dynamic here. So like in one of y'all's pieces, you talk about how there's the 100 true fans idea, which is the Lee Jin version. There's the 1,000 true fans, Kevin Kelly version, which is a little older. And basically the underlying idea of both of these is that the internet and digital dynamics make it so that you could actually build a living off of 1,000 people. And then Lee's point is that there are new startups, new dynamics that actually lowers that threshold down to 1,000. But what I think is really interesting about your perspective is those articulations only kind of get you halfway to the promise. So like go wherever you want to go with this, but I just think that the way you articulated the issue there is really helpful.
Yeah. Feel free to go after Legion and Kevin Kelly. Why not?
Well, no, because here's the thing. Because I want to be precise about this. Because like I'm not just like a podcast host for OnDeck. I'm also a creator myself. Absolutely. What they are describing is a real thing, right? So it's not the claim here isn't that they're wrong. I just think it's that there's a next step that you are doing a job to address.
Yeah, 100%, right? Like, and look, I think I have great respect for platforms like Patreon that really pioneered this kind of whole 1,000 true fans and 100 true fans piece, right? Like they made it as close as possible before Crowdpad, in my opinion, to come to that particular vision, wherein you would kind of have this committed group of people that just wanted to watch you win based on your talent and based on their liking towards you, and like, based on their contributions on a monthly basis or an annual basis that will kind of fuel or fund your life in a way to kind of continue to create this content, right? The issue is that like the incentives are just not aligned strong enough to an extent where you would really go to bat for a person, because once those $20 sort of go out of your account every month, it's like out of sight, out of mind kind of a thing. Whereas if and it's just like a contribution, you're not really getting a stake in the community, you don't really have any ownership there, despite how much you care for this particular person. It might be the case that you help them in this initial part of their journey and get some access to exclusive content in the mean process. But it might be the case that they might become really huge, and then you really have no stake in like their future kind of community, any real financial stake in that sense. And I think what crypto and social tokens and DAOs more broadly kind of like tackle in that sense is this kind of financial alignment as well. So from day one, instead of going to that person that's busking on the streets of Canada, let's say Justin Bieber, instead of going and tipping him $1, which basically changed probably his life and his thoughts around people believing in him as a creator and things like that, you can go and scan a QR code and invest in this token and really be like, hey, I'm not just here to give you $1 today. I'm here to actually go and bat for you. Every single day, I'm going to share your posts. I'm going to like your tweets. I'm going to, talk about you authentically and not just shill you everywhere, just randomly, but rather I want to meaningfully grow your community so that you can become successful and you don't have to basically give up all your hopes and dreams and give up every source of income to kind of make your dreams a reality. And for me, this comes from a place where initially I was trying to make a Patreon for entrepreneurs. I don't know if that's very clear, but the point was that I was working part-time jobs and I was like, oh, this is crap. I don't have enough time to focus on my actual passion and idea. And that's when I was just like, oh, I should just build this thing. And then obviously the obvious kind of barriers in that sense kind of came up where there's a point where the financial incentives just misalign. And I think that's why it's so important for social tokens to exist and why I believe that it's the first real manifestation of this 100 true fans theory, wherein it can actually be the case that someone buys your token and then a year in, you've been able to sustainably sort of with a 100-member DAO, a 100-member creator DAO, kind of sustain yourself for an entire year and even beyond that, because your token has done phenomenally well, and not only that, your content has been distributed far more than it could have ever been before. So that's kind of my take there. I think that, like I said, Patreon had done a phenomenal kind of job of getting it to 50% of the way, like you said, alongside all these theories. I think Web3 is going to propel it even further. You've seen that with NFTs and sort of how royalties are rewarding artists and really showing them what they're worth. I think social tokens will take that a step further and enable creators to operationalize their social capital to a degree that they can sort of even pay people out of their social capital, for editing videos, for mixing music, or for all sorts of things in that respect.
It's interesting. You are interchangeably using the words creator, artist, etc. And I think it's easy to treat them as the same thing, but they're actually kind of a little different because they speak to different profiles. So like you said, Justin Bieber, singer, it's early, getting discovered on YouTube days. That's the definition of artistry. I'm a podcaster. I use Supercast. I have people, it's basically Patreon, but more optimized for the podcasting space. I'm not quite an artist. So help us just kind of understand the profile of the people who are kind of looking at this thing.
Yeah, so I think that's a very fair point, and probably a little bit naive of me to generalize on that end with the whole creator piece being an inclusion of, in my head, it's more so an inclusion of independent streetwear designers, filmmakers, fine art, artists, and all sorts of things like that, and also your traditional hip hop artists, musicians, and those kind of things as well. But they are a broad set of creators. The reason that it's so broad right now is because we're still in that sort of experimentation phase, wherein we're trying to test and see who this token is going to be most valuable for. Is it going to be a podcaster like yourself, Marshall, or is it going to be a musician like Justin Bieber, who an early Justin Bieber, just starting out kind of a thing? Who is it going to be most valuable for, and who's going to be able to build digital native products using digital native communities, right? That's where the strongest use case really sticks. But that said, I haven't closed off conversations to a particular group of people. I think it's very interesting when people try to do sprints of let's say 4 weeks with a certain type of creator and another 4 weeks with another type of creator. What's really happening is you're losing time, right? All things said and all the market conditions and sentiment taken into account, I think we are definitely in a race against the clock to kind of personally I am, in terms of making sure that we try as much as possible, we throw as many shots as this thing as at this thing as possible, and then like try to determine who the strongest use case is for, and that's pre-PMF for you. Like, it's just like any other startup, except the customer demographic is so complex and so vibrant, so diverse, that you really need to narrow in on like who it works best for. So that's why I think I've been a bit broad with that categorization, but you can be sure that like, as and when we experiment with the launch of several tokens in the coming months, that we're going to be able to identify who it works best for and then narrow in on that, help them even further, and then like sort of come back to the other use cases post then.
Well, it's interesting because, as you're articulating this, to your point about, NFTs and success there, like that has tended to be with artists. This is not something, I think there are complicated dynamics here, but I'd say that newsletter writers and like podcasters and a lot of YouTubers who aren't directly in like the tech and crypto space have been a little reluctant to onboard onto the Web3 space. So I naturally think the most obvious use case, to your point, are just sort of like the more artistry focused part of this. I'm curious, you talked about how, you're trying to make this like usable on the user side, but you've got two different sets of users here. You've got the, I'm Marshall. I've never really spent time in crypto. I want to join this community though. You set up the UX so that it's good for me. But talk to me about the other users who are the artists, the podcasters, the writers. Like, talk about how you could make it viable for them in a way that doesn't just come down to the exact way that you place the buttons and made it like very usable. Because I think there's kind of a higher level of reluctance, skepticism, even fear, especially considering just the events of the past few weeks with the market. How do you think about onboarding those users?
Yeah, I think it's just about like this piece, right? Like it's very interesting that you bring up podcasts as well, by the way. Like I used to listen to Alex Lieberman's Founders Journal. I think that was his podcast. And like the way that he would like crowdsource almost opinions around like the podcast, the questions that came up from his audience because of the podcast, 10 minutes a day, right? Like that was the thing. And like, I feel like that's such a committed community already. And those are the lowest hanging fruits, like where there's such a strong sense of community as it is. And like the other piece I would say would be those folks with like a collector's mindset almost. I think that they are another sort of like big target piece for us, which is why streetwear companies are super interesting as well, because it's like folks want that like one of 20, one of 30 pieces, like, that they want to collect. And they would be the first like lowest hanging fruit, I would say, to go after, apart from like these super strong committed audiences as they are. Coming back to sort of what you're talking about, the user experiences and things like that, I would say TikTok is one of the most like, discovery friendly mechanisms in the world right now. Whether you are a writer, whether you are a musician or a podcaster, everyone's looking for distribution through a platform like TikTok, because short form has blown up like crazy in the last several years, right? So I think no matter what type of creator you are, you're trying to showcase your work in some way, shape, or form through a video native discovery mechanism. Like that is a super short form kind of a thing. That in our mindset is just a hook, right? And that's what we facilitate for to happen super easily. Hit a plus icon, upload your video, write the name of your community, the purpose of your community, and then launch your token. Very simple. That experience is kind of the initial hook. I would say when you're talking about sort of writers as opposed to musicians, when you dive deeper into those communities and buy the token of that particular community, you might actually notice that there's a lot more crowdsourcing of opinions that is happening. There's a lot more community proposals around what episodes to do things on, like, what the topics of those episodes should be. I feel like the type of engagement within those particular communities will actually be quite different from one another. But the initial hook of it, and this is us relying on, I guess, what has really worked in terms of like viral distribution in Web2 and trying to transition that and use that as a funnel for distribution, early distribution in Web3. And then like we'll sort of experiment and play around with that. But I think like what we're going with right now is like creators are comfortable, sort of putting out a short form video at the moment, no matter what type of like, what type of content they're creating, what type of artwork they're really like, putting out there. They're super comfortable doing a 10-second, 15-second video. So that's kind of what we're counting on to make this onboarding super seamless. The alternative would be to give everyone a token and have a Discord that like, kind of like links to that particular token, have 10 channels for that particular Discord, and then all of a sudden you're following 100 creators, you have 100 Discords with like 10 channels each, and it's like, whoa. And like to find a DAO, you have to type on Twitter DAO, and then like just scroll through all the different Twitter handles that have DAO in it. And that's your DAO discovery mechanism today. So in the context of creator DAOs, I feel like scrolling through like, simple creator videos and then just going like, oh, I love this community. Like, let me hit join and like buy a low stakes value into the community, explore, experiment, and then go like, I'm really excited by this community. I'm going to start contributing to it. I'm going to start voting on proposals. I'm going to start giving ideas for new episodes and things like that. Would be a very, very, possible, like very near future kind of interaction, in my opinion.
And it's interesting, and I'm glad that you keep using the word distribution, because it seems to me that it's very easy to dunk on Web2.
Yeah.
It's hard to make money. There are all these problems or these bigger narratives about the internet, but something that Web2, especially via YouTube, has figured out is just distribution. You can go viral. You can get discovered on the homepage. Like, these things like really do matter. Like, I do episodes where you see which episode gets picked up by the algorithm, and it's crazy relative to just something generic. So talk about distribution broadly and how Web3 could address it, and then how specifically, and you talked about the TikTok style thing, but just specifically how you're thinking about that challenge.
Yeah. So I think, are you familiar with Hobby Lami?
No.
So he's like basically like a couple of years ago when the pandemic hit, he was working as a waiter and then a factory worker at the same time.
Oh, this is the Italian.
Yes, the Italian.
Yeah.
From Milan. So he migrated from Senegal to Milan and had his whole family there. $1,000 a month was what he was making. Pandemic hits, he's not making anything. For a month, he puts out videos. He gets like 9 views and like 2 subscribers. And then after that, he just sticks with kind of simplifying ideas and making things super comical, and then sticks with that. Today, he's the second most followed creator in the world. And this is just a 2-year journey so far. And
this is on TikTok, correct?
Yeah, just on TikTok. And then branched out into Reels and things like that. Now he's also the brand ambassador for Hugo Boss and all sorts of things, right? Life really changed for Gabby, I would say, for the most part. And that was achieved, whether we like it or not, through TikTok distribution, through the For You pages, through the, native discovery mechanisms on any video first kind of platform. So I think that that's a really good example of what it looks like when something like this can change someone's lives. The additional element of Web3 coming in here is the financial incentives, I would say, the financial alignment rather, that sort of fans and community members have with the particular creator, right? The part where that if the creator wins, you also win, kind of a thing. I think that idea of this notion of sort of people owning platforms as opposed to platforms owning people is something that's taking off massively. And when they go from creators own communities to communities and creators can gel together and work together and produce something very cool. That's a whole other level of exciting. A good amalgamation of these two things would be I forgot the name of the creator, but she made a song called ABCDEFU. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No.
And yeah, you should really listen to it. It's a good one. Probably explicit if you have any youngers in our audience, probably not meant for you. But in the comment section of one of her videos where she asks people, how do you tell me what you want to make a song about or something like that. Someone said literally ABCDEFU or something like that. She makes a song about this and it becomes her most viral hit, almost instantly, right? So that's pretty crazy. And in a normal Web2 world, which is what has happened, the community didn't really get anything from suggesting that particular idea. There was no pool allocated towards this being a great idea that's crowdsourced efforts and things like that, efforts and money and things like that gone into the production of it. And then the rewards reaped from that particular song did not really go back into that community or anything like that, apart from more content, more virality, more distribution coming for the creator. In this Web3 world, we would have that intersection of that, the viral distribution piece where you're able to comment on the particular creator's video. At the same time, they're able to crowdsource ideas like this and really reward their community for their efforts. And I'm sure if that particular creator had access to these tools, they would 100% do it because every creator loves their community. There's no doubt about it. Everyone I've met who have 10K followers through to 5 million followers, they all are so passionate about the people that have got them to the place that they are. And I think no one forgets kind of their roots in that sense. And like they always want to give back to those people. So yeah, like that's kind of like a few of the examples that I would kind of like use to begin with.
Something I'm curious about is you, in critiquing the Web2 platforms, because that's what we're focused on right now, you talk about how, even on YouTube, right, this top 1-2% is, not making that much money. But then what about the other 98%? So you talk about how your ambition is to really like increase the minimum wage for folks who are doing this. So could you just like talk about like those YouTube dynamics and then just how you think that this could model out in a few years?
Yeah, people ask me this quite a bit, and they're like, Joel, there's still going to be losers on the platform. And that's a reality, right? Like, as in, your skill is kind of what speaks for itself. It's just that it's easier for your niche of like, talent to be number one, recognized, and number two, monetized, right? That's kind of what we're enabling. So the gap between the people that are like, sort of producing good content and like, consistently doing that, and like the amount of money that they're making as compared to Web2 is going to be significantly like, like destroyed in my opinion. Like those folks will have like, way more success financially speaking on a platform like Crowdpad as opposed to something like YouTube. That said, I do believe, like, I've said this before as well, that you kind of need Web2 distribution avenues and Web3 to work together right now. And I don't think we're at a stage where you can just completely ignore Web2 platforms and be like, oh, it doesn't matter, like whatever. There's still a big distribution funnel into Web3 platforms, and I think that'll stay for some time. But yeah, like I do think that that's kind of a core issue that we're trying to solve, like minimizing that gap almost, wherein like, the people that are earning like a lot of money will continue to do that, but like the people that previously earned a little bit of money or were close to monetization or whatever are now able to monetize a lot faster, and therefore increasing the number of people that are earning minimum wage on platforms and things like that. And I think that's really important, given that like something in the ballpark of 1 in 7 people want to be creators. So yeah,
I'd love the point you just made around using Web2 and Web3, because there's so much ideology that I think people feel the need to talk in this Web2 is this, Web3 is that. But I'm sure you do this. I send email. That's a Web1 thing. I hang out, and use Instagram. It's the definition of Web2. And also I'm on YouTube. And then, I own crypto. So there's really just a combination of things. To what degree do you think this is just going to be a perpetual reality of being a creator, which is that, you should have a social token, but you should also, especially if you're getting bigger, invest some of that revenue into a YouTube channel. How do you think about this dynamic?
Yeah, I think like it's going to come down to a creator's personal decision, right? Like they're going to look at the portfolio of revenue that they're making. They're going to look at how much of it is coming from YouTube, how much of it is coming from Crowdpad. Where is the funnels of distribution that's sort of like bringing that particular revenue into these platforms, even if they're not generating the most revenue? And then they're going to be like, what is really important to them? Like, is it to maintain that 1,000 true fans or the 100 true fans and like just cater to them? Or is it to continue to expand audiences? And if so, how do you do it on a Web3 platform? If so, how do you continue doing it on a Web2 platform? And I feel like they will look at all of those different things and come to a decision that works best for them. I don't think that there's going to be a one size fits all for this. Like, I don't think that you're going to see the eradication of like Web2 creator economy platforms just like that. And I don't like to like say that everything is going to be like 100% like decentralized and like, it's just all going away in a matter of a flash kind of a thing. Just because if you look at practical things, right? Like let's take the example of like storage solutions, for instance. Today, if you have to upload like something in the ballpark of 300 tetrabyte on sort of Arweave, it costs like, and this is a decentralized storage solution for context for our listeners, it would cost you something in the ballpark of $5 million, I think. And the same on AWS costs $10,000. So until we can reduce that gap of like, sort of the storage costs that are coming down, you can't really upload photos and videos onto the blockchain and then be like, this is not gonna, like, imagine if you had to pay to like post a video kind of a thing and like pay that much money in difference kind of it just does not work out. Like we thought about how we could implement something like that, and we just realized that we would burn through all of the cash that we have by just like trying to facilitate that. And before we even achieved any sense of Web2 creators trying to being able to benefit from Web2 platforms, right? So I think it's about a path to kind of getting to that place where everything is like, decentralized and things like that. There's like functional methods in which communities can govern without like sort of a central place to meet and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, or where their, sort of like their information is stored for that matter. So I think there's integrations of both things on our platform. That said, we're trying to prioritize sort of like key things like credentials of a Web3 creator, that we're talking about sort of which communities they've voted in and like those kind of things being available for you on the blockchain, like metadata being stored in that sense. We're also looking at sort of, participation, engagement, ownership within communities being like sort of highlighted a little bit more. But yeah, we're still figuring out like various mechanisms around the same thing. But it's going to be an exciting few months ahead. That's for sure.
Something I'm curious about, and I'm just thinking about this because I'm basically going through this process right now, is even that 1-2% of YouTube, which I guess I'm technically in just because my other podcast, The Realignment, has 55,000 subscribers. So like, once again, not crazy, but definitely like, that's there. Brings in like, but once again, that only brings in like $300, $400 a month. So that is not anything that anyone's making a living off of. Couldn't even pay production expenses with that. But that said, I was at a dinner earlier this week and I met some creators, and I met this 21-year-old who's on YouTube, and this guy's putting in 50 hours of work to actually succeed on YouTube with the clips and the storyboarding. It really made me realize that, wow, man, just recording a podcast and then posting the video is just so basic. You should not expect to be making more than $400 a month. But the point is, there's a very specific skill set that person is using on YouTube. And that person is in this top 0.01% versus my 1-2%. So given the skill set that I just basically articulated here, which is like treating this like a full-time, like full job, not just posting arbitrarily, what do you think the skill sets are that would make someone a strong social token creator? Once again, because you're comparing it to this YouTube system. Yeah. How should we think about that?
Yeah, I think the comparison is actually not one person and their skills. It's actually their community skills.
Interesting.
Like contributor role management is something that we look at a lot in DAOs. So more so in creator DAOs now, like imagine if there's someone editing your video, you've allocated kind of a certain amount of your social currency to go to that particular person for carrying out that task for you, because they are endowed at that, they're good at that, they're going to get that out for you, right? Similarly, there's going to be a great writer who's going to have great questions to ask, and like, who's going to be able to do that really well. You're going to allocate a certain amount of social capital to them. What you're doing is leveraging the forces of the community, the things that they're endowed at, and enabling that with your social currency, whilst also continuing to be the kind of level of creator, like, focusing on things that you're good at, and executing on behalf of the entire community. And then post that, basically rewarding the community with the benefits reaped from the collective effort, as opposed to the individual effort. This person is putting 50 hours right now because they're doing basically quite a lot of it on their own, and they're coming up with a lot of the scripting, editing, everything like that on their own. But think about it like a creator business, right? Imagine if a 3 million follower creator roughly has somewhat of a business running around it. There's sponsorships, there's ads, there's like merchandise, there's all sorts of good stuff, right? So think about it like that, where they have a roughly 6 to 8 person team to kind of like manage all of their different avenues of their business. I would say in a creator DAO, it would be very similar to that, in the sense that you have different roles allocated for different folks, and you reward them with social capital. So in that sense, it's not, again, to reiterate, not the skill of one person, but the skill of the collective. And the reward also doesn't just go to that one person, but to the entire community.
So a couple of big picture questions before we get to the end here. In one of your blogs, you specifically discuss how right now y'all are focused, I think this is in your funding announcement, you're focused on Middle East, North Africa, and India. Like, why is that the region that you're starting and focusing on?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question, right? Like when you're thinking about go-to-market, there's a lot of different, factors that come into play. What I think is that for me, it's like, maybe a bit of personal bias. To go after India, especially. I think that there's a dearth of talent over there that doesn't have access to a global capital and community network. Whereas in places like, Europe and America, you have an abundant capital network. And like, I think that it's far lacking in India in that sense. Or rather, I would say the right people don't have access to those particular capital streams, right? So it's just a personal preference to go after that, apart from the fact that you can also take like a much more massive number of shots. Like I said, we're pre-PMF, which means that like you're trying to see what sticks kind of and see what works best. And we're better than, one of the biggest countries in the world to kind of like go after one of the biggest creator audiences in the world, to kind of like see what experiments work and what don't, kind of a thing in that sense at scale. So I think that's kind of like the thesis there. But that said, look, at the end of the day, we're putting out a mobile app that can be used by anyone in the world, no matter where they are. It's about, we will see where, the platform has its strongest use case, just as I said, it does in terms of creator demographics. That also applies to geography of the creators as well, obviously. And I think we'll see a very interesting mix of people. That said, I definitely see a lot of scale of audience and scale of creators coming out of India. But again, like literally nothing against a global creator base or a creator audience or anything like that. We're building for everybody. We're building for creators that are hustling. And like, that's kind of what we're all about.
Another question that rolls from what you just said is, you described the fact that you're building on mobile via social as really challenging the status quo in Web3. So can you just explain what is that status quo and just make very explicit for folks the way this operates in opposition to that?
Yeah. So someone was asking us the other day why we don't have a white paper. And I had a very strong
thing. Can you explain the significance of the white paper to the non-crypto audience?
Yes, it's like the manuals that you have to run your cars in the dashboard that you keep in there and you never look at. That's what a white paper is. In the context of crypto, it's like kind of what powers each and every blockchain, like kind of like the documentation around all of that. Someone asked me why you don't have a white paper, and I just kind of like straight up went like, when Facebook was launched, did you kind of have a whole 30-page documentation on like, this is how we're going to make money on ads, this is how we're going to do this, and like all of this kind of good stuff, and then that's how you kind of got onboarded onto the platform? Probably not. It was just the fact that you could connect with your friends. Simple ideas being conveyed to the masses have just been lost in Web3, right? Like, I think that being able to kind of, if you're really putting community first, you're really putting like, accessibility and sort of like, giving opportunity to everyone at the forefront, then why are you layering it and like, sort of like adding levels of complexity that like, most people don't understand, right? Keep it simple, silly is like a very simple, kind of like common, kind of phrase that we end up using. And I just didn't see the point of that. And like going on mobile, it's just an extension of this as well. It's just like, where do we spend most of our time today, right? We spend our time quite a lot on our phone. I'm scared to even look at like my daily average, my my watch hours or whatever on in terms of my phone. And like it's even become a case that I do a lot of my work on my phone now, as opposed to just on like laptops and things like that. So I think it matters to go mobile first in that end, and like be super simple to use, be super consumer friendly, and it doesn't come from a web first platform. In my opinion, in this context, especially the creator economy context. But yeah, like that said, like it's not, we're not afraid of like going on web or anything like that. That's something that we can definitely build out. It's just, we want to go after this first. Everyone's gone after the web piece, and we've seen like interesting experiments happen in that space, and like, some have worked, some have not. This is our thesis and kind of what we believe in.
So last three questions here. One would be, and this is more of it's not personal, but it's personal adjacent.
Yeah.
Like I said at the start of the episode, crypto, creator economy, Web3, like these are very hot, very like FOMO inducing spaces. And then, we're in what could be a potential downturn. Investors are less excited. You're seeing more doom and gloom, like companies have layoffs, obviously. How is it like to be in this space now that the transition seems to have happened? Like, how are you thinking about it? And this isn't really about purely like Web3 and crypto. Just how are you as a founder thinking through that?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think it was tough because like, you kind of see people and love kind of like, sort of like in moving in that particular layoff kind of movement to other organizations or to like a search for new opportunities. And that's really a difficult one to kind of watch for sure. But that said, I think as a founder, you have to kind of keep that level head and, kind of see the bigger picture. You have to zoom out, as cold as that might be. And I think that for me, it was most important to be transparent with my team on the ground reality. Like, obviously, we were fresh off the raise. Like, literally, I think 4 days after our raise announcement came a lot of like roughly 42 companies like announcing layoffs and things like that in the tech space, which is insane timing. But like, I would say that sort of talking my team through it, it was just like, I know we're on this particular wave of a high right now, but I just want to, bring us all back down to planet Earth and just remind ourselves that this is what's happening outside. And we are not certain what sort of like, the economic outlook looks like within 3 months and 6 months and 12 months, or even 24 months for that matter. What we do know for a fact is that we need to build something useful for creators. Otherwise, it doesn't matter whether it's like financial speculation, like whatever that drives the platform. It's just like pointless, right? Like I said, I'm putting creators first. I'm putting sort of people that are hustling like above everything else. Because I was very much in a position once that kind of made me think about like, how am I going to fund my life with, by myself, like using all these mechanisms. And I can see through the lens of a particular creator in that end. So the bear market and things like that don't particularly scare me right now because of the privileged enough position that we're in, wherein we've just announced a raise. We've got a good amount of runway going through. It's more so about sort of making sure that we're using this time where people, the sort of scenesters, as we call it, kind of leave the space and like make room for people that are really building for utility, people that are really exploring primitives so that they can kind of change the trajectory of their life in that sense as a creator. So crypto has changed many people's lives for better or worse. And like I think that it's going to be very interesting what happens in the next couple of years. But like, ground reality for us, like, we're here to stay. We're here to make sure that we build something useful for creators. And that's kind of like where our sentiment lies despite the market.
Yeah. And to wrap, I appreciated the personal story post you put. And this relates to OnDeck. This is the OnDeck podcast. You were an OnDeck catalyst. You're an ODX company. Can you just talk about your OnDeck experience and how like it really was meaningful? Like your first check came from someone you met in Catalyst. I think it's important that when you're navigating spaces like this, that there's community and there's like something there. So can you just speak to that?
Yeah. Belief capital is my favorite word that's come out of OnDeck. It's something that Eric Thornburg talks about quite a bit as well. I would say it was very interesting. Yeah. Like, Lola was our first investor. She was on the Catalyst program with me. Funny story about Catalyst was, I guess, when I first got into it, it was kind of on like a multitude of bases, but it was kind of like take big bets on yourself. And like, that's kind of their criteria for who they bring into the program. And I happen to have spent quite a lot of my, if not all of my savings on coming to New York to kind of explore the startup space. And like, that was kind of wacky because people are just like, are you crazy? Like, you could do it over Zoom, like, and that would work great, right? Like, all these kind of things. So, I took a bet on myself and, took a bet on the people that I work with every single day and, did those things. And like, every time we leaned a little bit out of our comfort zone and did that thing that people that are super conservative in their approach towards like startups or towards doing anything risky, we kind of went one step ahead. And like, I think that was what was important to keep pushing the needle forward. Even now, like, there was like, we made like this one particular unplanned hire, quote unquote, I would say. It was, again, like, technically bear market, all of this kind of stuff. You should be like, cutting down, as much as possible, reserving and stuff like that. But to be honest, like, there are certain people and certain things that, will get you from A to B. And like when you see that opportunity, you don't just let it go. And I think a lot of founders hesitate. And when you hesitate in that moment and you don't take that risk, that's actually the opposite of like what the purpose of a VC-backed kind of startup is. It was great to sort of have like, sort of OnDeck, be our first institutional check as well. I think it really changed the game for us because I didn't have to work part-time anymore. I could like actually focus on like, just building this. I could hire a couple more folks on board. And yeah, like it's just been strength to strength from there. I'm really excited to make sure that it stays that way on that end. But yeah, no matter whatever's going on in the market and stuff like that, OnDeck is still the strongest community in the world for founders and funders and operators for that matter. Nothing's going to change that. And I think that a generation of like OnDeck based companies will, really go on to prove that. I think that Catalyst in particular, shout out to Shreya, Ani, Katerina, and Carol and all these folks that really pushed it to another level. It's literally a bunch of like 18 to 25-year-olds, I think roughly, that came in with like a lot of hustle and like that kind of a thing. And then cumulatively, the value of those companies that have come out, like if it was public, I said this in a tweet as well, y'all would lose your minds. Like these are kids that just hustled and worked on like multiple side projects and then cracked the code and like really building sort of like next generation companies that are going to change the world. And I think, you'll see a lot of that funneling back in when all of them become like multimillionaires or whatever and like start putting in their money for scholarships. Because I was on a scholarship when I got into ODC, like half of my thing was paid for by a scholarship. Because like my income thing did not just like add up on that end. So the other half was paid for by my university. Shout out to LSE. So that was kind of like my story with OnDeck and everything. Yeah.
No, really well said. And like I said, Joel, I've spoken to a lot of people who are doing, crypto stuff, a lot of people doing creator bits. And I think that aside from just the obvious like smart branding, I think you're a really sophisticated thinker and how these two spaces can be complementary. And, to your point about needing to build for that long-term vision, I think that's what it's going to require. We're past the point where you could just like drop these terms that would just mean anything. And I think you're doing what the next step is. So congratulations on the raise and best of luck moving forward with everything.
Thanks so much, Marshall. Really appreciate you taking the time.